6 men entered a tight cave system for important mapping work, expecting an adventurous day. Deep in the tunnels of Mossdale Caves, the reality they faced was devastating. This is the story of the Mossdale caving tragedy in June 1967. 10 explorers went into the Mossdale cave system to explore and clear some deeper passages for further mapping. The passages were poorly documented, but the 2 group leaders, Dave Adamson and his friend Jeff Bureau, were confident in their ability to navigate. They had explored Mossdale many times before. The cave was not designed for tours, with very few areas where one could stand. It mostly involved grueling crawls through wet, rocky, and muddy spaces. After a few hours, as planned, 4 members of the group, including Dave's fiancée, Morag Forbes, turned back. Morag was excited to marry Dave in less than a month. These casual cavers left the cave around 5 p.m. The skies were overcast but not threatening. Dave and Jeff continued deeper underground with their 4 caving friends, assisting with equipment and tools. Colin Vickers, John Ogden, and Bill Frakes were top cavers at just 17 years old, and Michael Ryan was the youngest. They started crawling through the Far Marathon Passage, a claustrophobic tunnel about 900 feet long, barely wide enough for an average-sized person. Imagine crawling in a space not much bigger than your computer screen, shoulders pinned forward with no room to spread your arms or turn around. Once you're in, you're committed for at least an hour. Near Marathon and Far Marathon are each 900-foot-long crawls. Between them is a small area where a caver can partially stand. As the men reached the last section of Far Marathon, they faced a tight squeeze. Their goal was to clear passages for further mapping. Around this time, Morag returned to the entrance to check on the men, but saw no signs of them. It had started to rain, but nothing too alarming. Underground, the men noticed streams increasing and groundwater levels rising slightly. At some point, the water levels became concerning. The men heard the increasing flow and felt the rising water at their feet. Knowing they were 3 hours from the entrance, they decided to end their work for the day. Dave, familiar with the cave system, would lead them out safely. However, they had no idea how much water was coming their way. Morag returned to the cave entrance at 9 p.m. and was horrified to see a lake of water collected around it. The entrance was submerged and inaccessible. In desperation, she ran 3 miles to get help. The men were moving back up the Far Marathon Passage, but the water level had risen. They had to reach a higher chamber quickly. The extreme distance in such a confining space was panic-inducing. With a heavy stream of water coming at them, they needed to move calmly but efficiently. Michael and Jeff were the first to squeeze through the tight starting section of the return. The cavers had to squeeze past the rock, pulling themselves forward with arm strength, using their rubber boots to help leverage forward. This time, the water came right at their faces instead of following behind. Jeff, familiar with the cave, hoped a swift effort would get him and Michael safely to a larger chamber. The other 4 men gathered their gear and prepared to enter Far Marathon. The water flow was becoming alarming. Dave knew where to wait out a flash flood from the storm. The experienced cavers moved with haste. Jeff and Michael struggled with the flood of water in the tight passage. It rose above their hands and shoulders. They tried to find the highest crack in the passage to lift their faces above the water. The amount of water flooding into the passage increased with no safe escape. The haunting truth was, there was nothing they could do. Dave led the others into the same cramped tunnel, hoping to beat the increasing water flow. They encountered the same devastating reality. The water was too high. They tried to elevate their faces above the rising water, seeking small air pockets, but there was no escape. John Ogden, likely the last in the tunnel, heard the desperate cries to turn back. Realizing there was no way forward, he slid his body backward, using his feet to lift his weight. He wedged his head and body into a small crack, hoping the water would stop rising. Outside the cave, a rescue effort began. The entrance was blocked by water, but there was hope the men found a safe chamber to wait in until water levels fell. Hundreds of volunteers helped dam off the entrance and install pumps to move water out. By Sunday afternoon, a day after the men entered the cave, rescuers made it down to Far Marathon. They shouted, hoping to alert the men that the passage was clear. It wasn't until they saw 2 sets of legs protruding from the tunnel that they realized the grim reality. The bodies of Jeff and Michael were discovered. One by one, the bodies of 5 men were found. John Ogden's body was found 2 days later, wedged into the overhead crack. All 6 men drowned in a flash flood that filled the cavern with water. The cave was closed and remains the final resting place for the 6 men. In 1970, friends of the cavers moved the bodies to an upper chamber, renamed the Sanctuary. In August 2005, 5 young adults decided to explore a little-known underwater cave on a mountainside in Provo, Utah. Nicknamed the Cave of Death, they were unaware of the deadly danger inside. Only one of them would return. This is the tragic story of the Golem Cave incident on Wednesday, August 17th. 5 friends were out for dinner and ended up talking about a hidden cave near the BYU campus. Many local students knew about it. 2 young cavers had explored Garland's Cave just a year before. At first glance, it didn't look inviting, as it was covered in a foot of water and only 4 feet tall. You had to crouch to walk through the nearly 100-foot entrance tunnel in a shallow stream. Most hikers wouldn't find this appealing, but the challenge attracted those who knew about the secret cave inside. To enter, you had to squeeze through an 18 by 24-inch water-filled hole in the ground. Even for experienced cavers, this was a daunting task. That night, the group decided to test themselves in the dark, uninviting cave. It was already 2 a.m. when they reached the cave. After sitting outside for a while, they ventured into the shallow cave. Jennifer Gilbreth had been through the watery tunnel before, so she reassured the others they could hold their breath and swim the 15 feet to the other side. Despite becoming hypothermic and passing out during her previous experience, she was excited to show her friends this secret place. Blake Donner, Scott McDonald, and Ariel Singer agreed to try it. Their 5th friend, Joseph Ferguson, decided to wait outside the main cave with a single flashlight. The 4 made their way to the small opening in the cave floor. By now, it was 4:30 a.m. and pitch black outside. One by one, they lowered themselves into the narrow, cold water passage. Jennifer went first, as she had been there before. They watched her head disappear underwater, and she emerged on the other side. The tunnel was no bigger than a refrigerator door, just 2 feet wide and 4 feet high. One by one, Blake, Scott, and Ariel followed Jennifer's lead. There was a rope attached to a rock in the main cave, leading through the underwater tunnel and tied to a piece of wood in the inner cave. With such a small tunnel, a rope didn't seem necessary to find the way back. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Brian Lamprey, a previous caver, had once overshot the exit hole and hit a dead end about 4 feet past it. He barely found the hole in time to avoid drowning. All 4 friends made the short swim to the small cave just 15 feet away. There was room to stand and move around a little, with the cave being 6.5 feet tall and peaking at 9 feet in the center. This left about 3 feet of airspace above the water. Joseph waited outside for his friends to return. He wasn't sure how long they planned to stay in the cave, so he just waited. After nearly an hour, he walked into the cave and looked at the watery hole but saw no sign of the flashlight or any movement. It was now 5:30 a.m., and he didn't know what to do. He called some friends familiar with the cave and eventually the police. At 6:25 a.m., the police arrived. The friends had likely been nervous and out of breath, their hearts racing with adrenaline. As soon as they surfaced in the inner cave, they would have taken a deep breath of relief. Unfortunately, the air in this small space was likely bad. In caving, bad air means air that isn't composed of the normal 21% oxygen and 79% mainly nitrogen. Because the cave was stagnant and the water source was closed, carbon dioxide buildup was likely due to several causes. As visitors spent time in the inner chamber, oxygen would be depleted, and carbon dioxide would build up. This is common in limestone caves due to erosion and seepage from plant decay. Evidence suggested that candles had been left burning inside, further depleting the oxygen. With no airflow, carbon dioxide would settle at a higher concentration at the water level. The friends in the secret cave would have had no idea about the bad air. Even if they stayed for just a few minutes, their capacity to think, move, and breathe would diminish, making the return swim dangerous. Once in the cave, they might have quickly realized they couldn't breathe well and needed to leave immediately. But with the entrance hole so small, only one person could go through at a time. Jennifer exited first, but couldn't find the exit hole before running out of breath. Her capacity for breath holding and critical thinking was likely diminished. If the oxygen level was near 10 to 12%, she would have only had about 60 seconds before passing out. Without the rope in her hand, finding the opening would have been a frantic effort of feeling along the ceiling. The others wouldn't have known Jennifer was in trouble. They were left in the dark, suffocating air of the inner cave. After counting for 30 to 60 seconds, Ariel would have been next to exit. With a carbon dioxide level of just 2 or 3%, her breathing rate would have doubled. She would have tried to take deep breaths before going underwater. Swimming forward with her final burst of energy, she might have felt Jennifer's body blocking the exit. Blake and Scott would have been breathing the bad air for several more minutes in the dark, feeling the effects of low oxygen and high carbon dioxide. After a short wait, Blake would have tried to swim through the tunnel. He would have been unnerved to encounter the 2 girls floating in the water in front of him. Realizing Ariel wasn't moving, he would have tried to push her towards the hole to save her. But in the narrow tunnel, this would have been nearly impossible. The last friend in the inner cave alone would have been suffering the longest. Eager to escape, he would have encountered his friends in a dire state. Rescuing the friends stuck in the inner cave was no simple task. The authorities immediately pumped air into the cave to restore oxygen levels and pumped out water to create an airspace within the tunnel. As the water levels dropped, they found Jennifer's body floating just inside the tunnel. After another hour, they found Ariel, Blake, and Scott together, facing the exit hole. Based on the evidence, the information from Joseph Ferguson, autopsies confirming drowning as the cause of death, and accounts from other explorers, we can determine what likely happened. 4 healthy young adults drowning in just 15 feet of water points to issues with the air. The friends were bold young people, between 18 and 28 years old, in the prime of their lives. After their bodies were recovered, the cave entrance was filled with concrete to prevent further tragedies.